Around 10:45 a.m. of January 11th, 1992, a hunter was making his way to his favorite hunting spot. But as he made his way to the spot, he saw something laying in a field. He felt that the best thing would be to investigate it, and so he started walking towards it. Now he could see it better. It was a badly burned corpse, laying wrapped up in a blanket. He contacted police as fast as he could. At first no one thought that the dead body could have been 12-year-old Shanda, but a tragic and fucking despicable story would soon unfold. This is the story of Shanda Sharer. Shanda was born on June 6, 1979. She was always a sweet kid, and her mother and father separated when she was still very young. Her mother remarried but separated again a few years later. It was in 1991 that Shanda and her mother moved to Albany, Indiana. Shanda had always been a pretty normal kid. She was on the cheerleading squad in her old school, and she participated in several sports. But something was about to change in her new school. It was a regular school day and she was helping a friend of hers. Wanting to prove her friendship, she was going to help her friend break up with a boy by returning a ring the boy had given the girl. She walked up to the boy, and for a few awkward seconds she tried to give the boy the ring. That's when someone came up behind the boy. It was 2 years older Amanda Heverin. Amanda was 14 and a lesbian. Amanda was a relative of the boy that Shanda was trying to give the ring to, and she confronted Shanda. The two girls got into a fight that the more masculine Amanda won. But now they were both in trouble and had to attend detention together. While sitting in detention, the two of them started talking to each other and became closer. A lot closer, if you know what I mean. Their relationship escalated from friendship to full-blown romance, something that was new and exciting for 12 years old Shanda, still a child. The two would pass notes to each other and hang out despite Shanda's mother seeing Amanda as a bad influence. But Shanda's mom didn't know about the sexual relationship between the two kids yet, and Amanda liked the fact that she could shape and control the young Shanda. But one day, Shanda's mom found something in the mail. It was a letter that Shanda had sent to Amanda, but she had forgotten to put a post stamp on it, so it had been returned to her own mailbox. Shanda's mom read the letter and realized what was going on. This older chick was having a relationship with her daughter, and as a result of the relationship, Shanda's grades in school had dropped severely. So Shanda's mom took action. She enrolled Shanda to a Catholic school, and Shanda and Amanda's relationship was broken up. But Amanda didn't want to break anything up. She kept sending letters, but Shanda was now out of her reach. But there was someone else. Melinda Loveless, 16 years old. Melinda Loveless was a control freak, a sociopathic crazy bitch. And she also happened to be Amanda's ex-girlfriend. Melinda Loveless was enraged with jealousy when she saw Amanda and Shanda together once, and she knew that Amanda was in love with Shanda. So Melinda Loveless started crafting a plan to get Shanda out of her way so that she could have Amanda all to herself. Melinda's plan involved 3 other girls. None of the other girls had ever met Shanda before, and 2 of the girls had no idea what they had signed up for. First up, there was Melinda Loveless. She was born in 1975 and had suffered a fucked up childhood filled with sexual, physical and psychological abuse. For example, her father used to wear Melinda's underwear and makeup and force Melinda's mother to have sex with other guys. Melinda's father Larry would share his wife with his co-workers, and he would have her gang raped in the house. Melinda's mother tried to commit suicide several times during this period and had even tried to drown herself after being brutally raped by Larry while Melinda and her siblings were in the next room, hearing everything. But a lot of people have fucked up childhoods. It's horrible, but it's not an excuse for what was about to happen. Then we have Lori Tackett, a rebellious 17-year-old with an obsession for satanic and occult stuff. Just like Melinda, Lori Tackett also had a rough childhood. She had been sexually abused twice during her upbringing, and her mother was a Christian fundamentalist, which is probably the reason why Lori was so drawn to the opposite spectrum. It was the early 90s after all. Marilyn Manson was just around the corner, and the whole occult style was on the rise in America. It had deeper issues as well. A year before she would join Melinda Loveless' plan, she had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and she was claiming to be possessed by a vampire spirit at times, and she would also cut herself, sometimes so deep that she had to be admitted to the hospital. But Tackett didn't know Shanda. Lori Tackett lived in a town many miles away. Lori Tackett had met Shanda before, but she was about to. Then we have the last 2 girls in the group. First, there is Hope Rippey, a friend of Lori Tackett. She was a pretty normal kid, although she would join Lori Tackett in cutting herself. Hope was 15 years old, and she had no idea what she was in for. Then there is Toni Lawrence, a quiet girl, also 15 years old. She had suffered some sexual abuse, but not by her parents, and she also would engage in cutting herself. Hope and Toni was needed for the plan, but they had no idea what Melinda was actually planning. The group of girls met up earlier that day, January 10, 1992. Melinda hadn't met Toni and Hope before, but she told them that they were going to kill a little girl. A comment that was dismissed as a joke, but it wasn't a fucking joke. At around 11:30 p.m. they arrived outside Shanda's house. Melinda told Hope and Toni to go to the house and tell Shanda that they were friends of Amanda, and that Amanda was waiting for her at a popular haunted spot called the Witch's Castle. According to legend, 9 witches were burned alive inside the building, something that Lori Tackett believed in wholeheartedly. Lori knew everything about the place and was obsessed with it. So Hope and Toni went up to Shanda's house, and Shanda, wondering who the hell these people were, told them that she couldn't go out yet, that they had to come back later. Half an hour later, at midnight, the girls drove back to the house. Loveless kept showing off a knife that she had with her, and she kept giving mixed signals, saying she couldn't wait to kill Shanda, while also saying that she just wanted to scare her. Tony didn't like what was going on and refused to go and retrieve Shanda, so instead Hope Rippey and Lori Tackett went up to the house, while Melinda was hiding in the back seat under a blanket. Lori and Hope went up to the door and Shanda agreed to sneak out. She thought she was going to meet Amanda. She hadn't seen Amanda for months and was excited to meet her again. But as soon as she sat down in the car, Melinda Lovelace jumped up from the back seat, grabbed Shanda by the hair, and held the knife against her throat. Shanda was scared, more scared than ever before, and she had no idea what hell she was about to go through. Melinda started to interrogate Shanda on her sexual relationship with Amanda, and then the group of girls drove towards the witch's castle. Meanwhile, Tackett was telling the legend about the witches that was burned alive inside the building instead of acknowledging the actual kidnapping that just went down. They arrived at the building and dragged Shanda inside. Shanda was sobbing and pleading, but there was no mercy for her, just spine-chilling coldness. The girls bound Shanda's arms and legs together, and Melinda Lovelace started taunting Shanda, asking her how pretty she would look if they cut her hair off with a knife. The sinister taunting frightened Shanda even more, and Melinda felt good. She wanted to inflict psychological terror, just as well as physical terror. Melinda then started taking Shanda's rings off and handed them out to the other girls. Hope Rippey took Shanda's Mickey Mouse watch and started dancing to the tune it played. Surely a horrible sight with her toothless fucking grin. Lori Tackett, the autistic occultist, started telling Shanda about the history of the place, telling her that the place was filled with human remains and that Shanda's remains would be the next to join them. In an attempt to further scare Shanda, Lori Tackett went and got a t-shirt that she lit on fire in front of Shanda, but she quickly put the fire out, scared that passing cars would spot them. They decided to drive somewhere else. Shanda pleaded and begged the girls to drive her back home, but Melinda Lovelace just ignored the pleas and instead forced the scared 12-year-old girl to take her bra off. Hope Rippey was driving the car, and she grabbed Shanda's bra and replaced her own with it while driving the car. In their excitement, the girls got lost twice driving around. The only one in the group that seemed shook up was Tony Lawrence. So far, she had refused to take part in the abuse, and she had to call a boyfriend of hers to calm her down. She didn't reveal anything about what they were doing, but it was getting to her. Now they were driving near a logging road in a densely wooded area. Tackett were leading the group to a garbage dump not too far away from her house. When they arrived, Melinda Lovelace and Lori Tackett dragged Shanda out of her car. Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence refused to go with them, supposedly because they were afraid of the place. While Hope and Tony were sitting in the car, Melinda and Lori was now forcing Shanda to strip naked. Once she had done what they said, Melinda started beating Shanda with her fists, and she also took Shanda's knee and smashed it into her face, repeatedly. Shanda was wearing braces, and the smashes to her face made her cut her own mouth with her braces. Then Melinda took out her knife. She didn't know that it was dull, and she attempted to slash Shanda's throat. But since the knife was too dull, she wasn't successful. She instead proceeded to stab Shanda in the chest, taking turns with Lori Tackett stabbing the little girl. But still, the knife was too dull to kill the girl. Instead, it just caused her more suffering. So they instead went and got a rope and started strangling Shanda, wrapping the rope tightly against her neck until Shanda became unconscious. Lori and Melinda then carried Shanda back to the car and threw her in the trunk. They told the other girls that Shanda was dead. The girls drove to Lori Tackett's home nearby to drink some soda and to wash away Shanda's blood. But while they were inside, they heard Shanda screaming in the trunk. The autistic occultist Lori Tackett fetched a paring knife and went to open the trunk. She proceeded to stab Shanda several more times and then slammed the trunk shut, leaving Shanda in there, still alive. The girls stayed at the home till about 2:30 a.m. Then Lori Tackett and Melinda Loveless wanted to go out driving a bit again. Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence stayed behind in the house. As Lori and Melinda was driving around, they could hear Shanda crying and making gurgling sounds in the trunk. They stopped the car and opened the trunk. Shanda sat up, covered in her own blood, and her eyes rolled back in her skull, not able to say anything. Lori Tackett picked up a tire iron and started beating Shanda until the noises stopped. But Shanda was still alive. Just before the sun went up, the girls gathered back at Tackett's home. There Tackett happily described what they had done to Shanda, and the autistic occultist was so happy describing it, she managed to wake up her mother. Her mother started screaming at her, and she agreed to drive the girls home. Tackett drove the car to a burn pile and opened the trunk. There she told everyone to stare at Shanda. Tony Lawrence still refused to take part and refused to stare at the broken body. But Hope Rippey sprayed Shanda with Windex and taunted her. But they hadn't had enough yet. Shanda was still breathing and they had to get rid of her. The girls drove to a gas station and filled their car up. They also bought a big bottle of Pepsi. Tackett poured the Pepsi out on the street and filled the bottle with gasoline. They had a plan. They drove down a gravel road near an open field. A really fucking stupid place to dump a body. The girls wrapped Shanda in a blanket, but Tony Lawrence again refused to get out of the car and participate. They carried Shanda, who was still alive, out onto the field. When they were there, Tackett told Hope Rippey to pour gas on the girl. They then set her on fire, leaving her to suffer the most painful way to die, being burned alive. But after all the attempts Melinda Loveless had made to kill Shanda, she wasn't sure that Shanda had died yet. So she returned a few minutes afterwards and poured more gas on the body. At around 9:30 a.m., the girls went to have breakfast, and they joked about how the sausages looked like Shanda's burned body. It said that Shanda's last words was her crying out for her mom. Meanwhile, at Shanda's father's home, he was worried to death. He couldn't find her, and he called his ex-wife, Shanda's mom, over. When they noticed that Shanda's purse was still in the living room, they contacted police. It took a few hours, but eventually a police officer knocked on their door and told them that their daughter had been murdered. Shanda's mother screamed her lungs out, and her father broke down on the floor, repeating the words, "My little girl." It's said years later that Shanda's murder broke her father's heart so much that he died from it. He never got over the pain of losing his child in such a fucked up way. Melinda Loveless drove to Amanda Haverin's house and told her that she had killed Shanda. Amanda Haverin was shocked and didn't know what to say. She didn't know whether to believe her or not, but she promised not to say anything. But Tony Lawrence was the weak link in the group. She was traumatized by what had happened, but then again she never attempted to stop any of it. She was a passenger, but she could have contacted police and she didn't. But she was hysterical, and she was brought into the police station by her parents at 8:20 p.m. that night. She could barely speak clearly, but she told police everything she knew. She identified the victim as Shanda. She hadn't even known her last name. The day after, on January, the other girls were arrested. It was decided that they were going to be tried as adults. The girls would accept plea bargains, and Melinda Loveless, the leader of the group, was sentenced to 60 years in prison. December 14, 2000, Toni Lawrence was released on parole after 8 years in prison. I don't have an issue with that really. She didn't really do anything, but she didn't help either. On April 28, 2006, Hope Rippey was released on parole after 14 years inside. On January 11, 2018, Laurie Tackett was released on parole. If you ask me, Laurie was just as brutal as Melinda Loveless was. She not only participated, she basically took over the leader role towards the end. Melinda Loveless is still the only one in the group that is still locked up. I don't give a shit about mitigating factors. You have watched this video, and I have told you what these girls did to Shanda. Do you think any mitigating factor can excuse the cruelty these crazy bitches inflicted to a 12-year-old little girl? I don't. Girls can be cruel. But this is more than just cruelty. It's fucking sick.